Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O. Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and I'm so grateful that you have decided to join me today for this review of Marvel Studios' new Avengers franchising movie, Thor Ragnarok. I just saw it the other day, and I'm very, very excited to talk about it as a longtime fan of Marvel Comics and a lover of superhero films in general. So what the heck is going on in Thor Ragnarok? Well, it takes place 2 years after Avengers Age of Ultron, and it finds Thor confronting the sister he never knew he had, Hela, the goddess of death, played by Cate Blanchett. And it really amuses me that, all these characters have titles like, God of Thunder, or God of Mischief, Goddess of Death. Of course there's a Goddess of Death. There's a god or goddess of everything in Asgard, apparently. But the majority of the film is actually not really about Thor's conflict with Hela. She exiles him from Asgard pretty quickly, and he ends up in this gladiator arena that looks like a more... it's on a planet that looks kind of like the trash heap in Blade Runner 2049, but it's more colorful, like Luc Besson's Valerian. And in this arena on this planet, he ends up fighting none other than the Hulk, played by Mark Ruffalo. And really most of the movie is, him making mischief on this planet, and then he finally gets to confront Hela at the very end. So, but let's break this down. Let's get into what this movie really feels like, what are some of its strengths, what are its weaknesses. It's directed by Taika Waititi, who is known for the mockumentary What We Do in the Shadows, as well as The Hunt for the Wilder People. And for, all you people who endured Green Lantern, yes, he did have a small role in Green Lantern. He was Ryan Reynolds' best friend back in that, so he actually has a DC Comics connection as well. But here, I don't know. This does not feel like an auteurist movie. Kind of like a lot of Marvel movies, it feels done very much in the Marvel house style. Where there's not a lot of drama, but lots of jokes. In my opinion, a lot of very lowbrow, easy, not very clever jokes. This is a movie where characters say the word anus multiple times, and we're supposed to giggle every time they do. And every time there's a big dramatic moment, it's undercut with a joke. For instance, there's a moment where the Hulk means to transform from Bruce Banner into the Hulk, and then he doesn't, and it's this kind of thing like, oh, he's gonna transform into the Hulk, woo, big excitement, and then he doesn't, and it's like, huh. And, it's supposed to be a joke, like, oh, he thought it was going to be a big dramatic moment. It's not. And there's a lot of that going on, and it's really part of this long-term, Marvel effort to cut against the seriousness of the superhero movies in the early to mid-2000s, like Batman Begins, like X-Men, like Spider-Man. And I get that initially they were trying to do something different, the way they did with the first Iron Man. But right now, this constant need to joke and, kind of break the tension with humor, I find it to be really tiresome and just a pain. Sometimes you want there to be tension. Sometimes, you want things to be dramatic and impactful. And due to the constant, barrage of jokes, there's not a lot of moments like that, and that's a problem. And that's a problem inherent in the very, structure of the film. We have Hela set up as the big villain, but, much of the film takes place on, as I said, in that gladiator arena, which is presided over by the Grandmaster, a character played by Jeff Goldblum, who wears a ton of eyeliner and is absolutely delightful. But this becomes problematic because the whole gladiator thing feels so disconnected from the plot of, Hela coming back, that, the movie feels very slapdash. It doesn't feel like a clean, cohesive narrative in the way that, say, Iron Man or the first Thor or Captain America the Winter Soldier did. This feels like a mishmash, a bunch of moments awkwardly welded together. And I think the reason they make so much of the whole Gladiator story is mainly because I don't think the Hela story is that interesting. She's not a complex character. She's just, one-dimensionally evil. She wants power. She wants to rule. She wants to kill people. And so there's not much you can do with that. So they created this, random plot to kind of fill up time and get some laughs in there. And the strain really, really shows. A lot of people, I think, are probably going to think that part of the movie is fun. I didn't think it was that fun, because the whole gladiator brawl aspect, it is so badly edited. Movies are just cut too fast these days. Directors have no patience, with the exception of Denis Villeneuve, who really, really knows how to take his time. And just going to go off on a tangent here for a second. No, Blade Runner 2049 is not too long. It's exactly the right length. Okay, now that I'm done with that tangent, back to Thor Ragnarok. What else can I tell you? Well, I don't want to spoil the movie, since it's not officially out yet. But I can tell you that this is absolutely an improvement over Thor the Dark World. Thor the Dark World, to me, felt absolutely, absolutely pointless. There was no joy to be found in it. It had a generic villain. It brought Jane Foster to Asgard, but that didn't have the kind of fish out of water fun of Thor being on Earth in the first film. And Thor: The Dark World, just an awful film. Very badly, awkwardly directed by Alan Taylor, who did such brilliant work directing on Game of Thrones. And Thor Ragnarok is absolutely a step up from that. Waititi is a much more confident cinematic storyteller than Taylor. And, while I didn't think the movie was very funny or dramatic or interesting, the plot moves at a good clip. There's a cheerful mood, there's bright colors, there's, beautiful psychedelic imagery, because we're in that cosmic Marvel headspace, inhabited by the first Thor and Doctor Strange. So there's fun to be had. It's a genial film. There's spaceships, there's Tom Hiddleston back as Loki, and, while a lot of the humor falls flat, a lot of it's on the level of that anus joke, there is some very funny parts, like at the beginning, there's a hilarious bit where there's kind of a play going on that sort of reenacts Thor and Loki's relationship, but in sort of a warped, hilariously twisted way. I don't want to say any more, again, don't want to spoil it for y'all. But it's very witty, and that's one of the jokes in the film that actually I think is very sophisticated and clever and satirical. But where does the film go from there? Again, without saying too much, I'll just say that I don't like the way this movie ends. It has a very open-ended conclusion that sets up Avengers Infinity War. And the final conflict, let's just say it's very formulaic, it's very by the numbers. If you've seen other Marvel Studios films, or frankly, any action movie from the past couple decades, you know exactly how it's going to play out. And the filmmaking just isn't interesting or involving enough to undercut the obviousness of the story, which I think is a real disappointment. That's not to say that there aren't reasons to see this movie, because in the main there is the cast, which, as I said, Goldblum, hilarious. He brings that very kind of, wise, cracking, but just kind of odd, off-kilter Goldbluminess to the movie. He's a lot of fun to watch. Chris Hemsworth he's fine. I think he was given more to work with in the first Thor, but he does his best here. Tom Hiddleston, who could not love Tom Hiddleston? There's a real sensitivity and grace and poignance to his work as Loki. He makes you see him as a tragic, lonely, isolated character, and I think that's very powerful. And also, Hela is a boring character. There's no dimension to her role, but Blanchett gives it her all. She vamps it up and has a lot of fun, relishing the evilness of the character. But I do want to point out that there was something that really disturbed me about the way they portrayed Hela. Now, the backstory, and I'm gonna get a little spoilery here, but not too spoilery, so it's up to you whether you want to keep listening. So the backstory for Hela is that, she was Odin's firstborn. She became too powerful, she became too evil, and so Odin locked her away and then, passed the baton on to Thor slash Loki. Now, I was a little unsettled by this plot because what we have here is a story about a patriarchal figure in Odin, imprisoning and oppressing his daughter, played, embodied by Blanchett. And I was very concerned about the way the film is telling this story about a man oppressing a woman, locking her up, shutting her away, denying her a voice. I was disturbed how it portrays that story without any awareness of the misogynistic implications. Yes, Hela is evil. Yes, she is a demonic character. But the film's refusal to see any depth, any redeeming qualities in her, speaks for itself. And so the moral is, she should have just been kept locked away, by the old, patriarchal figure. And I find that very disturbing. And I really hope that that kind of thing is not going to fly, especially, since, we're in the age post Patty Jenkins's wonderful Wonder Woman. And, at the same time, you have a character played by Tessa Thompson, Valkyrie, who is a very tough woman who, is very good in a fight and, brings a lot of charisma to the proceedings. But, she is a sidelined character, And in order to do anything of value in the plot, she has to be talked into, coming back into action by Thor. So, she's reliant on a macho male figure. And so I was unnerved by the way the film treated these women. I really think that it could have done better, and I think the inclusion of Valkyrie is just not enough to mitigate the way they deal with Hela. And I think it's such a shame, the way they do these Marvel movies, because if you remember, comic book movies are at their best when they have emotional depth in the film, when you have a character like Otto Octavius in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, who wants to bring something good to the world, but, destroys a lot of lives and is tormented by it, or Magneto in the X-Men films, who is a political extremist and therefore, a very recognizable, albeit terrifying, human figure. Or the Joker, in The Dark Knight, who is purely evil, but whose evil comes from layers, of insecurity buried under his freakishness. And when he's evil, it's not just out for world domination. The nature of his evil is very interesting. His schemes are intricate and psychologically complex, though the effect they have on people, because he torments people mentally more than physically. And I think it's a shame that, Marvel just cranks out villain after villain who just wants to rule or destroy the world and has a generically evil objective. And for me, that just doesn't cut it, because if the threat's not real, if the stakes aren't real, why should you care? And I know that, some people are probably waiting to say at this point, Marvel movies are for fun, they're to entertain us. Sure, fine, but if they're for fun, they should at least be funny. And again, I think the jokes are really lowbrow and lame, and the constant, attempts to undercut the drama with the humor, I think they grow really, really tiresome and, ultimately keep you at a distance from the characters. And I think that is a real, real shame. Alright, so to wrap up, should you go see this movie? Look, if you are someone who loves the Marvel movies, loves the so-called Marvel Cinematic Universe, chances are you'll like this, because this is more of the same. Me, as someone who is not a big fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, someone who has really only been excited by those films, when they've been really dramatic and powerful and complex, like the first Iron Man, the first Thor, and the Winter Soldier. Me, someone like that, this movie is probably going to leave them cold. And that's the truth. And again, since this film tries to set up Avengers Infinity War, and doesn't really have a compelling story of its own. I really think it's more of a glorified commercial for the next big Marvel movie, and as all Marvel movies are, they're really a commercial for the next one. So, I cannot recommend this movie. For me, this is not movie making. For me, a movie is a self-contained story that surprises you, that moves you, that gives you something unexpected, that gives you some ideas to chew on, and instead of wasting great actors, gives them rich, complex characters to play. And this movie doesn't do that. And I would just like to say to Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige and all the people there, aim higher, aim higher. You have the money, you have the time, you have the resources, you have the talented actors and directors in your stable. Try to do better, aim as high as Wonder Woman aimed, or as James Mangold's Logan aimed, or going farther back as Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy aimed, as Bryan Singer's X-Men and Superman films aimed, as Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films aimed, if I didn't mention those already. Comic book movies, they should not just be filler. They should not just be something to distract people for a couple hours and be forgotten. The superhero myth is a rich, rich myth about responsibility, about individuality, about finding your path in life. This is a defining myth of our time, and it deserves to be great, and it deserves movies that are better than Thor Ragnarok. Well, that's all I have to say. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you liked this podcast, and why wouldn't you, please click thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at T.H.O Movie Reviews. And be sure to check out all the great reviews and content we have at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com. And also, please comment below. Let me know what you thought of the review. If you agree, if you disagree, if you're somewhere in between, I don't care. I just want to hear from you. I just want to hear from listeners. Once again, thank you all so much. And from all of us here at THO Movie Reviews, happy movie watching.